Can we bring in
sure.
another?
Tim?
We're going to bring in Tim. The Virginia and New Jersey governor races, both being watched as possible signs of how next year's midterm elections might go. Here now, Governor Tim Pawlenty, Republican from Minnesota, and we've got Governor Rendell here as well. Governor Pawlenty, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you guys. Hi, Ed.
Hey, Tim. How are you?
I'm great.
It's Election Day. How much of it, depending on the outcome, do we read into a referendum on Democrats and President Obama?
Well, it's one benchmark or one bellwether, but it looks like there's a pretty good likelihood that Virginia is going to go Republican, that district up in northern New York, upstate New York, is going to go Republican, and it looks like the New Jersey is leaning Republican. So if all of that falls in the Republican column, clearly that's going to signal some sort of reaction, some sort of resistance to the Obama administration, the Democratic Congress. In each case, there's local stories and local aspects to it, but clearly if you go 3 for 3, there's going to be, I think, a grounded and meritorious argument that this is a reflection of the country not being comfortable with the way that the Democrats are leading it.
I asked whether it had anything to do with the prospects for the health care bills that are making their way through Congress. I mean, we don't know what the answer yet. Governor Rendell still thinks Governor Corzine's going to pull it out. But let's say that it goes against the Democrats, just for argument's sake, and then we'll go the other way and argue it the other way, Governor. But if it does, is that a referendum on health care, or at least on the public option?
Well, it may not be a referendum on health care per se, but I think what it's going to do is take the blue dog Democrats and the moderate Democrats who are already nervous about this amount of spending that the administration and the Congress is putting on the table, the debt, the deficit that is out of control, putting us on a pathway to bankruptcy, and make them even more nervous. So I think it's going to put more pressure on trying to get the bill modified in a way that would be more satisfactory to either the blue dogs or the moderate Democrats, or it may jeopardize the whole bill. But clearly, if the Republicans run the table, that's going to scare moderate and centrist Democrats in a way that won't be helpful to the administration's goal on health care, which is a good thing from a Republican standpoint. We want that bill to be defeated or dramatically reformed.
Governor Rendell, do you think no matter what happens today, it will change the course of the health care debate on the Hill?
Well, I think Tim's analysis is right. I think it's going to be harder to get conservative, moderate Democrats, the so-called blue dogs, to support something that's broad and visionary, and I actually think that would be a mistake. But I still think there's going to be a health care bill. There's too much momentum behind it, and the American people do want to change the system. There's no question about that. We're sick and tired of having those tell you can't get coverage because you have a pre-existing condition. We're sick and tired of getting dumped when we get sick, and we're sick and tired of no competition. Now, Tim, why don't you tell them about your proposal for competition? Because it's the type of thing that I think the Republican Party ought to be doing, coming up with interesting ideas, and Tim's come up with a good idea. It's not exactly new, but he's fashioned it in a way, and I'm going to respond positively, Tim. I haven't had a chance to respond to your letter.
Well, thank you, Ed. And if we could limit health care reform, and by the way, the system is broken. It does need to get fixed. And if we could limit it to the types of things that my friend Governor Rendell just mentioned, we could have a nice bipartisan package, because I think most Republicans and Democrats would agree on those things, on those you mentioned. On the competition issue in Minnesota and in most states, consumers are limited to very few real choices. In Minnesota, 3 payers or provider systems control about 85% of the market. The choices aren't robust. The competition isn't robust. So in the era of the Internet, I think it's reasonable to allow people to go on consumer protections and buy their health insurance from other states. And so Ed and I should be able to buy our health insurance if we want from California or Ohio or New York or Florida. That would give more choices, more competition. It's just one of the many things that we think would help the health care reform and really the cost containment issue.
I would Kaiser Permanente, for example, in Pennsylvania. That system, it's such a good and successful system. In Pennsylvania, in our 2 biggest markets, Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, we have one carrier that has over 80% of the customers.
Governor Rendell, you have raised some concerns, though, about the bills that have been making their way through Congress. Your biggest concern has been about unfunded mandates getting dumped in the states. Have they addressed those problems?
The House has, to a degree, better than the Senate. The Senate bill still poses tremendous problems for states that are extremely cash-strapped. When you increase the Medicaid population and let anybody sign up on Medicaid and say now the states are going to have to contribute to that expansion, yeah, I think that's fair, but what are we going to use to contribute? We can't print money. We all have balanced budget constitutional requirements. Where's that going to come from? And that's a real concern.
Governor Pawlenty, I mean, can we just assume you're there in 2012? You got your whole team almost in place, according to Politico.
No, you can't assume that.
I'm assuming. I'm just reading this. You got you got a political action committee. You got first. You got you've been assembling the blue presidential campaign, according to Politico.
But Tim, tell him about your radio hosting job as well. He's a radio host.
Yeah, well, I've got a lot of things. I'm a governor. I've got to finish out my term. And I did start this PAC. It's called the Free First PAC, TimPawlenty.com. Thanks for asking. But that's really just a platform to try to speak out to issues I think would be helpful to my party. It certainly needs improvement. I think I can add some value to that. Where that beyond 2010, I really don't know. I have not made a about what I'm going to do in politics or not after 2010.
Governor, in a perfect world, you know, everybody would listen to you and we'd put together a bipartisan bill, but that's not going to happen. And you say that the bill's going to be altered, the ones that we see around right now are going to be altered, and finally they're going to get something that is going to pass, and it might not be that bad, according to you. Is there any way it could end up being just overall a net positive? Anything that the Democrats come up with that could be net positive on health care, the final bill?
I think the direction they're headed is very dangerous and misguided, but if we could just focus on things like the following, we could put together a bipartisan bill. Let's agree that you can't keep out because they've been previously sick. Let's agree to portability, that you can take your insurance from job to job. Let's agree to switch from paying for volumes of procedures to paying for outcomes and better health. Let's agree to incentivize electronic medical records and e-prescribing. Let's allow across-state purchasing of health insurance and risk pooling across state lines, and many more. Those are the kinds of things that most Democrats, most Republicans could agree on. Let's just set aside the things you can't agree on. Then you'd have President Obama being true to his promise to bring people together on this issue and others, have a bipartisan reform that is needed. The system is broken, but what they're offering is not a comfortable thing to half or more of the country.
Well, what Tim said, and I agree with everything that Tim said, but the Republican plan, and his plan is probably the best and most cogent that I've heard from any Republican. But the problem with the Republican plan is it addresses a lot of the issues, and I agree, but it doesn't address one central issue, and that's how do we expand access to people who simply can't afford it. And I'm not talking about people on welfare. I'm talking about the guy who works 3 part-time jobs, works his fingers to the bone, and none of the jobs have health care. How do we expand access? How do we make health care available to that person? We've got to pay for it, folks. There's no free lunch in this country. Pay for it. We got to find the most cost-effective way to pay for it. I think we can do a lot of the paying for it by cutting costs in the system. What Tim has done in Minnesota, what we've done in Pennsylvania, have dramatically reduced costs to the system, and it can be done. But we've got to expand access, and we've got to find a way to pay for it.
Governor Pawlenty, thank you for your time today. Maybe you guys can be on the same ticket someday. And it's nice to hear.
I'm older, so I'm running for president.
Oh, you got to be. Well,
I like Ed. I like Ed a lot, but I don't like him that much.
Thank you, Governor Pawlenty. I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you. Thanks, Ed.
See you, Tim.
Bye-bye.
All right, this has been a Morning of News.